is to burn. High above the grit and the blood of mortals, a second sun is born. The air violently shimmers, fracturing the oppressive midday sky into blinding spears of solid, unrelenting light. It casts a brilliance so absolute and terrifying that it completely swallows the vast, dusty horizon of the western desert in an instant. They have not merely built a tomb, they have dragged the fire of Ra down to the sand. And the mortal world, blinded by such impossible radiance, must bow its fragile head in reverence. Suspended at the absolute pinnacle of human suffering and architectural supremacy, the colossal Electrum Pyramidion catches the merciless zenith sun. It acts as a flawless, mirrored weapon, reflecting the divine fury of the cosmos back upon the sprawling, wretched encampments of those who bled to raise it. The volumetric bloom of this unnatural illumination eradicates all subtle shadows in the upper atmosphere. It renders the apex an intensely glowing anomaly, a heavy geometric star anchored violently to the earth by 2 million blocks of quarried bedrock. The gods are no longer distant. They have taken up residence in the blinding glare. Beneath the searing halo of the summit, the domain of men remains cloaked in dark, jagged shadow. We descend past the overexposed white gold apex into the brutal, claustrophobic geometry of the timber scaffolding. Harsh, diagonal slashes of sunlight violently cut through the deep, sweat-stained darkness. They reveal the microscopic dust motes suspended like frozen ashes in the thick, suffocating heat. Here, the air is overwhelmingly thin. Starved of moisture, tasting metallic and bitter with the pulverized dust of thousands of chisels striking raw limestone. It is a ceaseless, rhythmic percussion that has haunted the barren plateau for 20 agonizing, uninterrupted years of relentless human taxation. Every timber groans under the impossible weight of a king's unyielding demand for eternity. Look down through the terrifying gaps in the cedar planks, past the vertigo-inducing sheer face of the newly polished casing stones, to the endless, sprawling grid of the worker cities far below, a chaotic tapestry of mud brick and misery that looks no larger than a scattering of discarded grains. To build the eternal, one must first consume the blood of the temporal. The overwhelming claustrophobia of the high scaffold creates a prison of wood and stone suspended in the sky. Men with skin baked into the texture of old leather move blindly, their vision permanently scarred by the relentless, blinding reflection of the polished limestone surfaces enveloping them. There is no sweeping melody to this monumental achievement, only the aggressive, low-frequency roar of the relentless desert wind attempting to tear them from the precarious ledge, and the agonizing, rhythmic heave of hundreds of chests pulling in the scorching, oxygen-deprived air of the midday inferno. They are not men anymore. They are merely flesh, turned to leverage and friction. Observe the microscopic topography of a single worker's hands. Deep, weeping fissures map a lifetime of forced servitude. The raw, bleeding cracks packed thick with white stone dust, and the dried, blackened remnants of ancient blisters that have burst and healed over the span of countless, unforgiving inundations. The oppressive heat distortion radiating from the vast, sloping plains of the monument acts as a liquid mirage. It warps the distant horizon until the division between the scorched earth and the unforgiving sky is entirely obliterated in a chaotic swirl of blinding, suffocating atmospheric haze. Nature itself recoils from the sharp, unnatural perfection of the monument's terrifying mathematics. We have ordered the chaos, but the cost was an ocean of human vitality. The final ascension of the Golden Stone demands a sacrifice of immense, coordinated agony. At the highest point of the earth, a desperate knot of master builders heave against the massive, groaning cedar levers. Their muscular backs arching under an invisible, crushing pressure as the colossal electrum-plated capstone, heavy as a fallen star, is painstakingly coaxed toward its final, waiting socket in the sky. The contrast is nauseatingly profound. The absolute, pristine geometry and flawless, blinding sheen of the sacred pyramidion is surrounded entirely by the chaotic, asymmetrical frenzy of desperate, gasping mortals. Bodies failing, trembling violently under the sheer gravitational terror of a single, fatal slip. If the lever snaps, the sky will fall, and 100 lives will vanish instantly. Friction becomes a living, malevolent deity, violently resisting the sliding of the immense mass across the lubricated wooden sledges, generating an auditory nightmare of screeching wood and grinding rock that reverberates downward through the core of the Great Pyramid, like the heavy heartbeat of a slumbering, buried god. Volumetric rays of harsh, fractured sunlight pierce through the thick clouds of pulverized mortar and swirling dust, kicked up by the frantic shifting of the workers' bare feet, highlighting the glistening streams of sweat that cut through the thick grime, masking their exhausted, hollow, and terrified faces. Divinity is not conjured by prayer. It is dragged upward by shattered spines. The pharaoh demands a horizon without flaw, regardless of the corpses beneath the stones. A sudden, sickening shift in weight sends a violent shudder through the primary scaffolding. It causes a momentary, terrifying paralysis among the crew. The massive golden block tilts dangerously, catching the zenith sun and blasting a blinding, anamorphic lens flare directly into the retinas of the screaming overseers. In this microscopic fraction of a second, the entire fate of an empire's spiritual survival balances precariously on the frayed, overstressed fibers of a single, massive palm rope. A terrifying realization of fragility hiding directly beneath the veneer of the most imposing display of absolute power ever conceived by mankind. The geometry of eternity teeters blindly on the precipice of mortal failure. Hold the line, push back the gravity. The sun must find its resting place. One man, a nameless laborer from the deep southern gnomes, loses his footing on a plank saturated with the sweat of his predecessors, his hands tearing raw as the thick hemp rope burns violently through his calloused palms, stripping the flesh to the underlying sinew in a burst of silent, agonizing trauma. He does not scream, for the air required to voice his agony is far too precious. Instead, biting down so fiercely into his own lip that a thick drop of crimson falls, plummeting downward in slow motion, an unnoticed offering to the cold, pristine, polished white limestone sliding silently beneath his trembling frame. A drop of blood to seal the tomb, a silent covenant between the dust and the stars. The machinery of the gods grinds endlessly, indifferent to the fuel it consumes. The chief architect, his eyes shielded by thick layers of woven linen, thrusts a heavy copper guiding rod into the impossibly tight fissure beneath the hovering golden apex. Reading the subtle, unseen alignments with a frantic, obsessive precision that borders on absolute, terrifying madness, born of the impending climax. Every muscle in the collective chain locks into a state of rigid, burning tetany. Politely, the incomprehensible mass of the glowing pyramidion suspended an inch above its final resting place, while the roaring wind desperately tries to dislodge their precarious grip. threatening to send them plummeting into the swirling abyss below. The stone descends. The world locks into its permanent, unyielding geometry. With a final, desperate release of tension, the colossal wooden levers are thrown back, and the monumental electrum capstone drops violently into its precisely carved limestone socket, impacting with a deep, concussive shockwave that shudders down through 6 million tons of solid rock, anchoring the sky firmly to the bedrock. In the exact fraction of a second, the stone makes flush contact. The high noon sun perfectly aligns with the sheer, flawlessly polished planes of the golden apex, igniting a catastrophic explosion of blinding, pure light that violently pierces the swirling dust, obliterating the shadows of the exhausted men. The connection is made. The mortal plane is instantly severed from the divine. The volumetric anamorphic flares cast by the electrum capstone streak horizontally across the upper atmosphere. A terrifying display of localized physics, where the sheer concentration of reflected solar energy creates a localized heat mirage so intense that the top of the pyramid appears to be entirely dissolved into liquid, pulsating fire. The laborers, blinded and completely broken by the physical taxation of the climax, collapse onto the narrow, perilous scaffolding planks, their chests heaving in ragged, desperate rhythms, ignoring the terrifying drop beneath them as they simply stare into the wood, unable to look upward at the furious god they have just crowned. High noon absolute. The horizon is swallowed by the blinding glare of the pharaoh. It is finished. We have built a mountain of light, and we are left in the darkness. The deafening, chaotic roar of the wind at altitude seems to suddenly harmonize into a single, terrifying, low-frequency drone, resonating perfectly with the geometric angles of the newly completed monument, turning the entire structure into a massive, silent bell, ringing out into the vast, unforgiving emptiness of the cosmic void. Time, the ultimate devourer, cares nothing for the blinding arrogance of kings. The blinding golden light fractures and rapidly decays, violently dissolving as the camera pulls backward through thousands of years of relentless erosion, stripping away the flawless, gleaming white casing stones, tearing the sacred electrum pyramidion from the sky, and leaving behind only a raw, jagged core of heavily weathered, exposed bedrock. The terrifying isolation of the ancient high noon is instantly replaced by the sprawling, chaotic smog of modern Cairo, a suffocating blanket of gray exhaust fumes and the relentless, mechanical noise of millions of transient lives. Crawling like insignificant insects around the base of a silent, forgotten, and stripped monolith. The gold was stolen by thieves, the white stone stripped for lesser walls. Only the heavy, brutal core remains. Where men once bled and wept to lift a mirror to the gods, now only a blunt, flattened summit points blindly toward a hazy, indifferent sky. An amputated stump of ambition towering over a world that has completely forgotten the agonizing, breathless terror required to construct its flawless, vanished geometry. They sought to blind eternity, but eternity is entirely indifferent to the light. Look upon these ruined, staggered steps of immense decaying stone, and realize that the greatest triumph of human administration and visceral suffering did not conquer death. It merely created the world's most colossal, silent witness to the inescapable, terrifying truth that all men, even gods among them, eventually return to the dust. The fire of Ra has burned out. Only the heavy, silent stone remembers the weight of the sun.